Yes. Okay. So making sure that everything is up and running. Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to Peacemindedly, a podcast show featuring peaceful bridge makers. So you are the peacemakers, peace builders, peace lovers. So much welcome to Peacemindedly. This is Sara Jamshidi. Today is November 17th. And it's a very particular day for my own sake, my own life, and that's the very important reason, at least for me. And that is, it's the day basically I entered to the United States. This day is a very important day for me and my family, especially my husband, because this is a ritual, and I'm so grateful for the ritual that every year he writes a note for me on November 17. This morning I came to my office and I again yes, this is the note in Farsi. I faced with his note. It's in Farsi. I try to translate it into English, and here it says, "My darling, I congratulate your victorious arrival to the United States to raise the flag of love in our lives. I hope we keep this flag raised at all time." Yes, I mean, thank you so much. And the funny thing about the about the postcard is for those of you who are listening to the program. It's the picture of a wolf, and I think this is the second wolf, the picture of the wolf that I'm receiving. And then I just told her that, honey, next time you just need to give me an angel photo. Hopefully next time. Yes. So I was thinking about what to do this for this hour, and how to start the program. There are so many people, a fan of the show and fan of the program, contact us via email, via Facebook message, via sending us mail and so forth, and they ask particular questions. I just end up seeing many of the questions that is being repeated during the many emails and many conversations that we receive, and I thought, so for the sake of this program, I'm just going to update my guests about my audience about what's coming up, and also try to at least answer some of those questions. And in order to do that, I thought, so maybe I just give a very brief and quick background about why we are doing this show and what is the story behind Peacemindedly. And when we say peace journalism, it's in the questions that people ask, what is peace journalism, why you are keep referring to peace journalism, and what is your motives. So for the sake of that matter, I decided I'm just going to give you a very brief background about the show and about why we are saying it peace journals, and also just go through the Q&A and answer the questions. It's going to be a very brief show because I planned to be here briefly, update you, and then for the next week we have two guests talking about food, because we are going to, in the Thanksgiving weekend, Thanksgiving week, it's the important week in the United States, and we are going to talk about food. But for the sake of this program, so I thought how to arrange it in a way that to be meaningful for my audience, and here we go. So I would like to give you a background about why we are doing this, what is peace journalism, and what is Peacemindedly. Many of you who have been listening or watching this show, you know that I'm from Iran and I am from the Middle East. So I was born and raised in that country, and came to the United States on November 17. Before coming over, I was just writing about featuring women's movement, featuring women's rights, and then directing documentaries and doing lots of programs about this space, until I decided, okay, so the environment became very unsafe for me and for many of the reporters who are really working on the difficult circumstances under tyranny or undemocratic governments. So it becomes very difficult for them to perform within that space. It was the case for me. I decided that I really need to leave the country and go a different place. For that matter, we do not have a U.S. embassy in Tehran, so I decided what I would like to do is to go to Turkey and apply for U.S. visa to see whether or not the visa will be granted to me. And it was another reason. My fiance was in the U.S. and I really wanted to reach him if I could. So it was my assumption to go to the U.S. embassy and try to see whether or not I can get the visa. So it was a very interesting anecdote between me and the counselor that I'm just going to run very quickly here, and then I go to the reason that I started this. At the time, I was working for Zan newspaper. Zan newspaper is the only newspaper in the world, according to Reuters, according to Associated Press, according to many of the large media, the only newspaper who was writing about women. It was for women and by women. And as a matter of fact, the head of the newspaper was Faiza Hashemi Rafsanjani, the daughter of the former president and one of the very big advocates for women's movement and women's rights. And counselor, we started just learned that I work for Zan newspaper, and he said, okay, so he got interested, and he said, okay, so two particular questions he asked me, and the question was, okay, so of these two countries, which one would you think that select their female president? And then I mean, immediately my answer was, of course, Iran, because Faiza at the time was very big in many of the works that she was doing, and then for me was, of course, I mean, hopefully Iran is going to choose her first female president. And the second was, it was a match between US and Iran, and the soccer race, and the question was which one of those two countries are going to win the soccer race. And I said, I mean, Iran, of course, because Iran is very, very big in soccer race and all of those. I mean, make a very long story short, I got my visa and I was able to come to the United States. And here's the story begins. In November 17, I arrived to the country, November 17, and then I joined my fiance. We went to our first gathering. It was before Thanksgiving. He was doing his PhD in epidemiology. It was our first gathering. So we went to the University of Washington in Seattle. It was, international students, domestic students, many people in this gathering. And here's what happened. In this gathering, there was a tall, beautiful, blonde young woman. She came to me and she asked two particular questions that I ended up answering those two particular questions forever. Since started 1999 up until now, just before the pandemic started, I was in a gathering of a group of female reporters and journalists, and the same question was asked from me from a Seattle Times reporter who was just sitting by me. Okay, so the questions. The first question is, are all women in Iran wear scarf? And the second question was, so men are allowed to marry many times and have multiple wives. So I wonder, how many wives does your dad has? Believe it or not, these are the two questions that I get answer all the time. So my broken English, I had to explain. I mean, it took me a few minutes to explain, you know what? Yes, women do need to cover, but there are so many things happening in Iran that we do not see it here. We do not see it in the media, including women's movement, how women are really pushing for a larger space to extend and expand their rights within the Islamic State. And then yes, there are, according to the law, men can take many wives. I mean, at least 4 and even more. But it's a tradition that's not been practiced in Iran. So I ended up just answering all these two particular questions. And after a while, I became very angry. I became very upset about ways in which I am answering these particular two questions anytime people know I am from Iran. And then I started wondering, what is this? What is it? Why people are asking these two questions, and only these two questions and nothing else? What is it? So I decided to investigate and see what's going on. Okay, so here we go. Media forms, frames, and shapes public opinion. They do that. And we consume news and information, right? I learned that almost any story about Iran is according, or big stories about Iran is just frames around this two particular issue. It was before the nuclear program. Of course, after the nuclear program, we have different sets of questions. But before the nuclear program, these two particular issues, two particular questions. And here's my challenge to you. Here's my challenge. So my challenge is, next time you read New York Times, if you go to the word section of the New York Times, and if you look at the last paragraph of any given story that is not about Western nations, you end up seeing sort of the same ending. And the ending is almost always negative, and almost always puts that country or that nation in a dark side of this story. This is a given fact by research that has been done. It's the construction of foreign news is done in 1967 by a few researchers in Sweden, and the fact is still holds truth, that we write about other nations with negative connotations, and that's what's happening. So I decided, thinking, okay, so if we in the US are writing about other nations with negative connotations, especially for the at the end of the story, how about other nations? How about Iran? How Iran is covering United States? And what is the story about? How media tries to shape and frame the public opinion of Iranian about the US. And believe it or not, it was the same. It was the same anecdote. I mean, I didn't do through research. It's not according to the academic research or any of those. It's according my own observation of how we are covering other nations. So it's the same fact with the Iranian newspaper, that it's not the same fact with Iranian public, but Iranian newspaper, that almost every story about the US is negative. So why I tell you this is to just draw your attention to this phenomenon, that in the media, we try to shape the public opinion. We do that. It's not trying. We shape the public opinion. And we shape the public opinion according to what the public opinion is requesting, or what the political hierarchy are requesting of that kind of shape, that kind of frame. And that is problematic. That's what we see, what's happening. So in many scale, and then got me thinking. So if that's happening against Iran, what about particular communities or particular nations? So how do we cover, for instance, Muslim communities in the Western media? And the research was astonishing and overwhelmingly negative. According to a study at the University of Birmingham in UK, School of Social Policy, Institute of Applied Social Studies, Chris Allen studied the phenomenon, and he found, according to the 6 newspapers who are covering UK news, 91% of the stories about Muslim communities in UK is negative. 91% of the stories, and just think about that. And we are talking about UK, United Kingdom, or Britain, who is one of the countries very friendly towards this community. And then got me thinking, okay, so this is what's going on. The media shapes and frames the public opinion, and they are doing in a way that it's negative towards other nations, and specifically against Muslim community. But yet again, I am from a nation who I know that so many amazing stories happening within that region that worth talking about, and media is not covering. So what to do and how to do it was my answer. I decided we are going to apply peace journalism. So peace journalism is ways in which editors decide to frame a story in a most constructive way that tells the story from a bias towards peace rather than bias against war and violence. So war is a big business, and stories about war sells, right? So a war correspondent writes the story and they publish it. But oftentimes when we go to that nation and we write a story about that nation and that people, when war ends, we leave. We do not stay to see how that community and that country really rebuilds itself after the war. And that was my attention. My attention was to see how how individuals really taking responsibility to frame a different story about their own nations. And I came up with the idea of Peacemindedly and podcast story. In Peacemindedly, we find, I call them peaceful bridge makers. I mean, in the media, we have to have narrative. We have to have narrator. We have to have someone who is telling this story, right? Okay, so I find these people and then I'm going to tell you exactly how I find them. I just use all of my journalism background and media background and try to find them. And these are peaceful bridge makers, and I feature them in the show. In this platform, people who are working with me, there are 4 people. I'm the senior producer. 4 people are helping me out, and I'm always so grateful for their help, and help me to just move the show forward. And Matin is one of them. I have a web designer and a graphic designer. Most of the work is done by me, and then those people are helping me out. So for Peacemindedly, I thought, okay, so here's what we are doing. We are going to feature peaceful bridge makers, and we are doing to feature those people who are bridging gap between their own nations and the United States. We have, just think about the story that we had last week. I talked with Sertaç Sehlikoglu. She is the researcher, scholar who studied women in Istanbul, ways in which they are contributing to their self-making within their social discourse, and then they are a group of Muslim women who care about their look, care about what they want, care about their own desire, and they really want to pursue their personal desires. So it's a study is done in English, and we interviewed the author. Or I had, for instance, Shahla Haeri is the university professor who studied Muslim women leadership, especially political leadership, and ways in which they perform within their social sphere. And then we talked about those Muslim women leaders. Or I have plenty of those stories. Oh yeah, we have happy stories, like a philosopher who translated an interesting book about happy life. So what was happening in ancient Rome, and what we can learn from that story to use it for our life today. So in the most peaceful manner. These are the things that we are doing in this program. And so how to find our guests? I just want to show you. This is just probably an exhaustive list of people who I am very much interested. Yeah, it's just here. Let me see. For instance, for the next episode, I am planning to talk with a few filmmakers. I just highlighted their names. Few filmmakers. One of them is James Longley. James Longley or Langley. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. But the filmmaker for Angels Are Made of Light. A movie in Afghanistan and the story of a boy, or this is story, an opera of the world. So a group of African women who are doing this opera thing in different villages. So these are filmmakers, or there are who are those people. So I'm just trying to book Uzma Jalaluddin. She is the chef for a halal restaurant, and she wrote a book about her activity. Or I'm so big in immigration and covering immigrant stories. Roya Hakakian, a beginner's guide to America for the immigrants and curious. So when immigrants are coming to this country, how they move forward, build their lives, and do the things that they need to do. These are, so I research, see who is the best fit for this show, and I do the interviews. This is it was actually one of the questions by who is this? Yes, Zahra Mubarak. She asked, how do you choose your guests? I do it through research, and then sometimes I ask Facebook community, I ask my friends, or people are referred to me, and then I research to see who is a very good person, and then we do a story about with the interviews with that individual. The other question they ask, okay, so let me see. Oh yeah, Mariam Islami. How do you choose your topics? The topic needs to be around peace and around, I say, compassion and kindness, and mostly we try to feature women, and we try to feature who are really good in explaining and articulating the idea. It doesn't need to be famous or infamous or whatever. It just I just pay attention to whether or not this guest really can deliver the message to my audience to understand the concept more clearly. And the topic is almost always about peace and about kindness and compassion. The other question is, what is the process of creating each episode? So the process is very, how can I say, very lengthy, and usually rewarding by tiring and rewarding all at the same time. The process is it's the 11 steps that we go through. The first step is to research, to find the person, to see whether or not it's a good fit, then to do the pre-interview, understand their concept, read their books, or research about our guests, prepare the program, do the social media promotions, and then do the interview. Prepare for the interview, do the interview. After the interview, I edit the program, and then we post it on the website. So it's a very through steps that we need to take to finish every episode. Do you have a focus for the next season? Yes, I mean the focus of the this is Raina Austin asked me whether or not we have a focus for the next season. Yes, the theme for the show is kindness, compassion, and peace, and we are talking mostly with filmmakers, people who are doing documentaries, and writers, and artists. So I have 2 artists in our pool. This is for the next season. Next season starts on February, I think, 3rd. Again, it's going to be every Tuesday, 12 noon, Pacific Standard Time. And we usually manage our show for 1 hour. It's everything the same. And we run from February until the end of June. So basically, we are talking about 22 to 25 programs. And when I say program, is really a program, just putting all of those details together to create the show. Helen Schneider asks, why do you nod your head too much? Yes, I just do this all the time when I am talking with my guests, and this is one particular reason. So radio journalism is different than TV journalism. In radio journalism, we should not speak, because whatever I say is going to be captured by the microphone, right? So therefore, but I need to explain my guest that whether I understand them or whether I do need them to explain even more of the subject. So when it's not visual, one of the techniques I use it for Free Speech Radio, News Discussing Public Radio, other broadcast media that I worked for, is I just do very aggressive nodding. It's going to be too funny if I do it here. Aggressive nodding, or what I do is I just, make face like this, yeah, I mean, extending my hands or getting the shoulder up. So in a way to explain, so what do you mean, or tell me more. This is when it's not visual. But when it's visual, and when we are doing the TV, I basically can come in the screen and ask the follow-up questions. But the nodding is coming from my radio journalism when I had to encourage my guests or my sources to explain more about the topic. The other question I have, oh my God, I forgot to write down the name of this individual. So many guests say this is a good question, and she kindly add, in fact, you ask good questions, but how do you come up with your questions? I have to research and study every episode and every program, and I run my questions with Mateen and with with Amjad, our editor, and then sometimes they add a few other questions to the questions that we're asking, or you know what? Sometimes the most obvious question is the best question. And I learned that. I learned that through my experience. Asking, why do you do this? How come you came up with this idea? Why it's important? I found that oftentimes the most obvious question is the best question to ask. And I usually start or go with that trick. Yes. So the other question is whether or not, this is from Helena Smith. So whether or not you plan whether or not you plan to how do you sustain? How do you sustain your show? I'm thinking long term. I'm thinking that I really would love to run the show as long as I can. And for sustainability, we need to raise fund and we need to raise money. So most probably now that I know there is interest and people are watching and we are delivering the message, I'm just going to get back with my team to see how we can put the proposal together for raising fund for the show and for the things that we do. So this is, hopefully we can do it this year before Thanksgiving, or at least during the holiday season. Yes, this is what we do with Peacemindedly. The next show is our last episode is next week, Tuesday, November 24th, and it's going to be about food. I have two guests, food writers and chef and dietitian. They know a great deal about what we call real food, and it's one of my questions: what is a real food? But we're going to talk about how and in what way we prepare our meal that is nutritious and really serves our family and our environment. This is one of the areas that we are going to touch. And also, I'm just going to have them to share a recipe with us. And there are one of the guests have a book that the book just saturated with lots of interesting, good stories about food and blessings. So I think we are going to have a rich discussion next week. Next week is the last week. I just wanted to run with you about the programs that we've done and also why we are doing this and why it's important for us. The next season starts on February, the first Tuesday in February. I don't know exactly when. And it's going to be exactly the same every Tuesday, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, with a line of guests that we are going to introduce during the month of December and January. Yes, please write to us. Your question is important. It's very important to me and to my team. We take it into our consideration and we answer them the best way we can. As I said, the questions that I just explained and featured here are the questions that many people had asked, and I thought it's probably my responsibility to come over to this program and to just explain some of those issues. Until next week, thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you next week, Tuesday, 12 noon, here on Peacemindedly podcast and channel. Thank you so much. This is Sara Jamshidi. Take care. Bye-bye.